I stood there in utter disbelief, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Karen, the local HOA board member, was standing in front of me, holding a gun. It was like something out of a bad movie. I had dealt with her ridiculous complaints about my property for years, but this was a whole new level of crazy. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I didn't want to make her feel more threatened, but at the same time, I couldn't let her get away with this. The gun was steady in her hands, aimed right at me. I could see the wildness in her eyes, the desperation that had overtaken her usual smugness. She was no longer the HOA Karen I had come to despise. She was someone unhinged, someone I didn't recognize. And in that moment, I realized she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book. Karen, this is insane. I finally managed to say, trying to keep my voice calm. You can't just come onto my property and threaten me with a weapon. This lake has been here for 150 years, long before your HOA even existed. It's my private property, and there's nothing you can do to change that. Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward, the gun never wavering. You don't get it, do you? She sneered. The HOA runs this neighborhood, and your property, your little lake, is part of the community now. If you don't follow the rules, there will be consequences. The HOA has authority over all properties here, including yours. I shook my head, disbelief still heavy in my chest. You're crazy if you think the HOA can control my property. You've gone too far this time, Karen. I knew I needed to de-escalate the situation, but my mind was racing. Karen had crossed a line, not only threatening me with violence, but also overstepping her bounds as a board member. My grandfather's legacy, this lake, and the land it sat on, it was all being threatened by someone who felt entitled to control everything around her. I had to do something. I wasn't going to back down. Listen, Karen, I said, my voice a little firmer now. You don't own this land, and you certainly don't get to decide what happens here. I don't know what kind of power trip you're on, but I'm not going to let you intimidate me. For a moment, Karen just stared at me, her fingers twitching around the gun as if trying to decide whether to pull the trigger. I could feel the tension building, but I wasn't backing down. The silence between us was deafening, each of us waiting for the other to make a move. Then, without warning, I turned on my heel and started walking back toward my cabin. My heart was still racing, and I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I couldn't let Karen get away with her behavior. I had to think, and I had to think fast. I reached the door to my cabin and stopped, my hand resting on the doorknob. Karen's gun was still fresh in my mind, and the way she threatened me, but something else was brewing in my chest: anger, frustration, and a deep need for justice. That night, as I lay awake, I kept replaying the events in my mind, unable to sleep. What would happen if I just let Karen win? What would happen to the lake, to my family's legacy, if I let her and her HOA board take control? No, I couldn't just sit back and let this woman and her board members take away what was rightfully mine. They had no claim over my lake, no claim over my land, and I had to make sure they understood that. There had to be a way to stop her, to stop the HOA from trying to bully me into submission. The idea started to form in my mind, a plan. Not just to stop Karen, but to take back control. If she wanted to play dirty, then I would play the game, but I would play it on my terms. The wheels were already turning, and I knew it was time for me to make my move. In the morning, I was going to do something bold, something Karen would never expect, but that would have to wait. For now, I had to make sure I kept my calm and my head clear. I wasn't going to let this woman or her HOA win. The night stretched on, the stillness of the cabin interrupted only by the occasional rustle of trees outside. But inside, my thoughts were loud and clear. I was done being pushed around. The next step was mine. As Karen stood there, seething with rage, I could feel the weight of the situation settling in. I had no intention of letting this woman or her HOA intimidate me any longer. For years, I had quietly dealt with their petty complaints, their rules, and their attempts to infringe on my rights. But now, Karen had crossed a line. She had threatened my property, my legacy, with a gun. And in that moment, I knew I had to act, and I had to act fast. I made my way back into the cabin, my heart still pounding from the confrontation. My mind was a whirlwind, but one thought kept repeating itself. I can't let her win. Calling the police seemed like the obvious choice, but I knew from experience that they wouldn't have much interest in a private property dispute with an HOA, especially when they had their own set of alliances. If I wanted real justice, I had to find another way. That night, as I lay awake, a plan began to form. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just going to fight Karen and her HOA. I was going to take control of the entire situation. If they wanted to dictate how I use my land, then I would dictate how they ran their HOA. And the best way to do that? Buy the whole thing. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The HOA was a powerful entity, and its members were deeply embedded in the community. But I had connections, and one of them was a friend in the real estate world who specialized in distressed properties and HOAs. I picked up the phone and made the call. We spoke briefly, and within minutes, the plan was set in motion. It wasn't cheap, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. I poured everything I had into buying up the majority of the HOA shares. It took a week of intense work, multiple meetings, phone calls, and negotiations, but by the end of the week, I had secured control. The HOA was mine, lock, stock, and barrel. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to show Karen and the rest of the HOA that I wasn't someone they could push around. The following week, I walked into the next HOA board meeting with a calm confidence. Karen, sitting at the head of the table, didn't expect me to show up. She looked taken aback when I walked in, but that was nothing compared to the shock that followed. As I sat down at the table, I felt a small but satisfying sense of triumph. "What are you doing here?" Karen demanded, her voice cold and condescending. She looked like she was preparing for another confrontation, but I wasn't interested in playing her game anymore. I didn't waste any time. "I've bought the HOA," I said flatly, letting the words hang in the air. Silence followed as every single person in the room processed what I had just said. Karen's face went from smug to pale, and I could see the panic setting in. "You can't do that," she screeched, standing up abruptly. "This is illegal. You can't just buy the HOA and take over." "I just did," I replied calmly, pulling out the legal papers that confirmed the transfer of ownership to me. The room was frozen, and Karen's angry outburst became a faint murmur in the background. I was in control now. "I'm evicting you from the board," I continued, my voice steady, effective immediately. Chaos erupted. Karen's supporters, the other board members, started shouting, demanding explanations and accusing me of foul play. But none of them could challenge the legality of what I had just done. I had the papers, I had the control, and I was about to use it to overhaul this toxic system. As I expected, Karen was furious. She made a scene, trying to gather support, but the tide had already turned. There was no way to undo what had been done. One by one, I removed the corrupt board members and replaced them with people who truly cared about the community. I wasn't interested in people who wielded power for personal gain. I wanted people who would act in the best interest of everyone, not just themselves. By the end of the meeting, Karen and her cronies were gone. They were unceremoniously evicted from their positions, their egos deflated, and their power completely stripped away. The atmosphere in the room had completely shifted. What had once been an exclusive club of self-important individuals was now a group of people who were about to make positive changes in the community. As I left the meeting, I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. The entire HOA structure had been shaken to its core. The people who had tried to bully me, to control me, were now irrelevant. I had not only taken control of the HOA, but had ensured that it would no longer be a source of tension or frustration for the people who lived in the neighborhood. The rules that had once been enforced with an iron fist were now going to be about fairness and respect for property rights. And as for the lake, it was exactly where it had always been, beautiful, untouched, and now completely free from the clutches of Karen and her HOA. I could walk down to the water's edge, knowing that no one would try to take it away from me.